In 1965, I went to work at KLMS in Lincoln.
What did you think when you went out there and walked into that old stone building?
It was out at 84th and O.
Yep.
And it had about halfway out, you had gravel road, and then the rest was dirt. Had a circular driveway, semicircular driveway. And it was an old stone building, and the sales offices, business offices, and the manager's office was in the old converted garage of this stone house. And it was really, actually, when you count the rooms, there was only 3 rooms to it. And that was that one room that I just described. There was the newsroom, which was right in front of the front door. And then to the left was the engineering department and the broadcast studio, which was all one room. And it was interesting, to say the least, because a lot of times you had to walk. You had to park your car at the bottom of the hill. It was too muddy, or if the snow blew, it was too drifty to get there with your car, so you had to plow through the snow. And we had a giveaway one time of a little race car, open type thing, and the idea was to guess the total mileage on it as the top 40 disc jockeys drove it around town, and we'd drive it around those towers. As a matter of fact, after we got done with it, they had to give another one away because we had pretty well run that one into the ground. I used to drive it down O Street, clear down at the other end of town, the west end of Lincoln.
Now, yesterday said the swinging gentleman, but were you the All-American, or were you
go-go guy?
A go-go guy, that's right.
That's right.
And you were at KLMS, and by the way, I have some film of a Christmas party that Carl Lewis took in color with a very young Rick Banks.
KLMS with the go-go guys.
He was one of the best operations managers I ever worked for. He was very strict, very demanding on you, and also, he made you toe the line, which was great. You learned a lot under him. I learned that it's get instead of get, and often instead of often.
Oh yeah, he was a stick.
Yeah, he was.
And weekly air checks.
Weekly air checks every week.
And no,
it was kind of like Hell Week.
You couldn't escape them.
No.
At least famous. Even the part-timers had to occasionally go in for an air check.
Yeah.
Nobody escaped them.
But he was one of the best operations managers I had ever worked with.
And one nice thing I liked about at least the arrangement we had, and I'm sure with Harvey it was the same way, Lee had the authority to make decisions.
He did.
He didn't have to run to the general manager to ask, can we do this, can we do that?
Right.
He either had the authority or took the authority. Either way, it got done.
This was back in 1965, and I don't know if I think I told the story, maybe I didn't, at our reunion that we had. What was that, 5-6 years ago?
That was in 2005.
Okay, gosh, that's
7 years ago.
That's longer than I thought. I know they wanted to make it into an annual affair or semi-annual, but I guess that didn't come about. But anyway, it was a great time, and I told this story. When I first was there, I walked in the door and met Lee. This was after I was hired, and he showed me around the station, which took about 3 seconds. And he said, we had an unfortunate incident happen here about 2 weeks ago. The night man made some disparaging remarks against African Americans. They weren't called that. They were called Negroes back then. And a couple of nights ago, we had a car come through the drive, and like I said, it was a semicircle drive.
Right.
Drive in one end and out the other, and they shot up the building.
Oh.
And he said, I suggest you go downtown and buy yourself a gun if you don't have one. Because I was working 8 to midnight when I started there.
Yeah.
I was the night man, so I went down and bought myself a gun, just for protection.
Oh, sure.
Because we were out in the country. We were out in the boondocks then. And, you carried your gun inside and hoped nobody would come by the building and blast it again. But you could still see the bullet holes. They didn't break out any windows. I think they fired 2 or 3 times and hit those rocks. there, the building, which was a stone building.
Yeah.
I think it was sandstone
Yeah, it was a
or limestone.
light,
Yeah, it was a
kind of
light
tan
colored.
color.
Yeah. But that would have been an experience.
You know, that's a KLMS story I've never heard.
Yes, true, very true. He said, go out and buy yourself a gun. Because I was there, I worked nights about 2 to 3 weeks. And then he says, well, you know, not bragging, but he says, you're kind of good and we want to put you middays, which was noon to 4. And that was right before drive time. Gary Kynes, remember Gary?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
He was drive time 4 to 8.
I know the name.
And I was there, did that slot for about 2.5 years. Close to that, because the morning man left, and he says, we're going to put you mornings. Lee did, and I said, I don't work mornings. I'm not a morning person. And I said, if you do, I'll leave. And so he says, we're going to put you there. And so it took me 2 weeks, and I went over to KFOR.
Mm-hmm. You don't bring somebody down from Topeka, though.
You know, that's another thing about KLMS in Lincoln that I really did like. I mean, you're working out there in an old converted farmhouse, and we had more engineers out there than we did radio announcers.
I think so.
Because and the thing that I know it for a fact, I know because the thing I liked about it, because you know that first 5 years that I was in radio before I went to Lincoln and KLMS, you know, you took your own transmitter readings, you did this, you did that, and you had your own engineer that did that. When you walked in, I mean, if you walked in at 8 o'clock that night, and, you know, if you're an announcer, you're going to think, what's going to happen that I can't control? That's, you know, technical. It's at the technical end of it that I don't know about. And I'm going to have to call an engineer. You didn't have to worry about that because you had your own engineer. And that to me was just amazing. I was in seventh heaven. The only thing I didn't really like about it was they didn't have cart machines when I first started there. They had Magna Quarters, we called them Maggies, and I think there were 4 of them. And they were stacked on top of another one, and the top one I had to stand up to reach because I'm short. Mm-hmm. And you did your commercials out of there, you did your PSAs out of there, you did your jingles, everything came out of there. And you had little toggle switches, 4 of them here, and you'd hit one and start, hit one, the other one and start. And then you had to manually rewind the tape. And those things would rewind at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Exactly. And tape would go flying all over the place. And you're restocking the machines, putting the tape back on the machines while you're in the middle of music, trying to think of stuff you're going to say, you know, after the record is over, going into the next record. And I remember the first night that I was on 8 to midnight, I went home and I actually cried. I said, I told my wife, I said, I cannot do this. I'm not going back. I mean, I was just a physical wreck. You have no, did you ever work with that out there?
Thankfully, we had cart machines.
Yeah.
By the time I got there.
I mean, that was, but then once you got onto it, it took me about a week. It was just like second nature. I mean, you could really do it fast. They could be loaded fast. Mm-hmm. And they really worked. Very rarely did one break down.
That's what they were made for, those
yeah.
PT6s.
Uh-huh.
You know, and you could thread them up easy and everything.
And then we had an echo chamber, we had a beep, we had a time beep. And right when I started, there were 2 buttons here to the left on the control board. One was the time beep, you know, and the other one was the echo. And Lee had come out and said, we're not going to use those anymore. We've been using them for 3-4 years now. And, oh, you know, that's a toy that I wanted to play with. Mm-hmm. So every once in a while I'd use it. He'd stick his head around the corner because his office was right to the left. Oh, yeah. And say, you know, we're not doing that anymore. But the newsman would come around, and he sat in a little cubicle on the other side of the echo machine, which was a great big type thing. And the echo machine, all it was were 2 wires. The springs that hung down.
In the rack.
And you'd come down there to do the news, and he'd go, whop, hit the side, and everything on the air would go, wow, wow, wow. Just to screw you up. But
I remember those days.
Right. And the night man, the all-night man that worked there, one time he used to keep his beer in the window, in that north window in the wintertime to keep it cold.
That wasn't Jay, was it?
I don't
Okay.
think so.
Sounds like Jay Marshall to me, but
I don't think it was
could be
Jay.
any number of other.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
But the night man, the all-night man, was always getting in trouble with girls. Of course, all the girls would be calling him and wanting to date him, and he'd be getting in trouble with the girls.
Oh,
And then
I've
we
heard
had
some stories.
one real nice fella. He was a news director, and poor fella, he had epilepsy, and he had epileptic fits. And every once in a while, we'd get a call from the police department that he was on O Street between 84th and O and someplace downtown, pulled over to the side, having a fit, that we needed to come and get him. He couldn't drive. But he would have him at the station and, just lay down on the floor, and you'd think the poor guy was dying. But he was a good newsman. But he could feel them coming on before they came on. And he would usually pull over at the side of the road, stop the car, or else he'd sit down in the chair, sit down on the floor, because that's where he'd wind up, in the station if he had one. And I can't for the love of me think of his name. But he was a real nice fellow. Real nice fellow. Don't know whatever became of him. But hopefully he got over the epileptic fits.
Well, I just wrote that down. That's another story I've never heard about.
You heard the one about Harvey Swenson.
I've heard a lot about Harvey Swenson.
When he got drunk and went before the court.
Oh, I hadn't heard that one.
Yeah, night court. Yeah, they picked him up for intoxication someplace outside of a bar. He was quite a drinker.
Probably outside of Cliffs. He'd always go down to Cliffs.
Probably. And anyway, he went before the judge.
My. Actually, Harvey, by the time I got there in March of 73.
Uh-huh.
And I never met the man. He was so sick he wasn't at the radio station. And just about 2 months later, he died. And I remember sitting in for Lee Thomas in the afternoon because they had gone to
I didn't know when he died.
Yeah, it was in May or so of 1973. And he was only 53, I think.
He wasn't very old, no. Yeah, there was kind of a rush in the
You
background.
were talking about the newsmen at KLMS. Remember, they had to turn the air conditioner off.
Yes.
While they did the news.
That's right.
And then they turned it back on again.
Uh-huh.
And the air conditioner for the production studio always got frozen up.
Yes.
So they'd have to turn it out, thaw it out,
Yeah.
and it'd get hot in the production studio.
Yeah, I guess those were the good old days.
Oh, yeah.
Although I remember, too, I don't know if you remember at KLMS, we still had that old GE board there that came out of the 1940s. It was early.
Yeah.
But it was a good board. It always worked. And I always liked, I never liked it when the faders came in, Like you have the sliders
Oh, yeah.
and the push buttons.
Want a rotary pot.
I always wanted a rotary pot and a toggle switch. That was great.
And
Those
now-
were good times.
And now what do we have? We have a mouse to click on the
Yeah,
computer screen.
right. Now you've got a computer screen.